Good morning and welcome to Thoughts and Updates here this beautiful May morning in God's own country of Scotland, where I'm in the gazebo out in our garden. One of my stepdaughters, Kira, had friends round last night, and therefore they had their socially distanced evening in this monster of a gazebo that they put up yesterday afternoon to accommodate it. As we come out of this particular lockdown into tier 3 or level 3, I can never remember which is English, which is Scottish, we are beginning to see the opening up of aspects of life, the dropping of COVID deaths and indeed infections, and the start of a belief that somewhere along this line there may be some kind of normality. Schools are open, non-essential shops are open. You're allowed to travel around Scotland without staying at various places, which hopefully will open up and we head towards the tourist season and start to see a very vital part of our economy coming back on stream. And of course, this coming week, Thursday, which is ironically also my birthday, we're going to have the Scottish election. More of that later. Writing this week, let me take you through a couple of things I did for Talking Boys, my usual review of the old boxing with Charlie Edwards becoming the next British world champion last night. There were 4 fights involving British fighters, 3 of whom were fighting for world titles, and none of them managed it. No shame, it has to be said, for the majority, and once again, women's boxing, I think, showed just exactly how big it ought to be in terms of getting credit for being a genuine sport. I've also been looking at Dan Aziz, English title holder for Ringside Report, rather than delving into the past for this week, and also been talking about Dale and Pascoe in my TV review, which I've been catching up on. And also last night, Lorna and I started watching Line of Duty Season 6. What a cracking BBC programme that is. And of course, it's the big reveal tonight. We'll probably spend some time getting ready for that. I've also been talking about the once-in-a-generation investment that Joe Biden has announced for social care within America, and I'll come again to that later on because it's a once-in-a-generation as a phrase that has traction with some people. For the Scottish Football Supporters Association, I have been looking at what happened with David Cox during the week, who walked out of a game because of something that was said to him regarding his own mental health, which is appalling. And also looking at the 3 teams who have managed, 2 out of 3 rather, not all of them, have managed to gain promotion back in to whence they came, being Partick Thistle and Hearts, after they were, in their own eyes, disgracefully relegated after the end of the season last year. So they have bounced back, Stranraer being the one that hasn't managed it, and I have imagined the manager of Stranraer being brought in to account for his inability to do the same as the other 2. And reviews this week, I'm just finishing off editing Ghosts, and I'm going to be looking at a few things today. Tennis Elbows out, which the new John Byrne, Royal Lyceum, and Pitlochry, which I'm going to review as well for next week. So all happening in many ways. So fit else, let me pick up on a couple of things that I think are quite vastly important. Once in a generation, the 6th of May, this Thursday, we have a once in a generation opportunity, or it's simply the most important Scottish election of all time. It depends very much on that phrase, because it was used, I believe, by Alex Salmond at the last referendum, and has been used against independence supporters since then, because the referendum in 2014 was seen by many as the once-in-a-generation opportunity to become independent. And like Quebec, I think it's the only part of the world that's voted against its own independence. Scotland followed suit and voted against becoming an independent country, partly because of something called the vow. The vow was a promise given by the national leaders, those being the British leaders of the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, the three unionist parties, that we would be in a position, a better position, had we stayed with the Westminster government and part of the United Kingdom. So the Scottish people, in the majority, voted to stay in, and that is understandable, and it is exceptionally right that we did not become independent because we didn't vote for it. However, part of the vow was that the best way of staying in Europe was to remain part of the United Kingdom. Well, that's been proven to be an utter nonsense. There has been a change in the way in which we are governed because we have come out of the European Union, the largest trading bloc in the world. Our young people have lost the opportunity to go and visit 27 countries, to exchange educationally in terms of work experience as well, and learn from their compatriots throughout the whole of Europe by a decision made by the majority of people within the United Kingdom, which is right and it's proper that the United Kingdom should therefore come out of Europe because the United Kingdom voted for it. Yes, except for one simple thing. The people of Scotland didn't. We weren't alone. There were other parts of the United Kingdom who didn't vote for it. And the absolute mess that we are currently in is testimony to the reason why people voted to stay in the European Union. We have riots in our country, in Belfast, because of Brexit, because of the border along the Irish Sea that the Prime Minister promised would never, ever happen. And while he's embroiled in lots of sleazy allegations over how he paid for a refurbishment in his flat, in his private residence within the Downing Street where he resides as Prime Minister, while he has many, many sleaze allegations against him and others in his government who have benefited financially from the COVID pandemic by bidding for contracts, or not even bidding for contracts, being given them. We seem to be tethered to the tombstone of Westminster. We seem to be stuck in the sleaze, which is therefore a broad brush that taints all of our politicians in a way that is unfair. So the Scottish people have on Thursday an opportunity to stand up and say, look, had enough. We listened to you, we believed you, and you didn't come up with the goods. So we're going to go now. Almost like a relationship which has gone sour. We have the opportunity of, in a dignified manner, walking away. And I hope we take it. The Scottish National Party government is not perfect. There are certain aspects of their policies and indeed their record that I have struggles with. But the one thing that is compelling is to take responsibility for your own actions. The one thing that is compelling is to have the opportunity to stand up and say that the decisions that we take are the decisions that we are going to have to be responsible for. It's something in politics that I am very, very strongly in favour of, and it's something in life I'm very, very strongly in favour of too. Responsibility. Not just rights, but the other side of the coin. Responsibility. David Cox during the week is a little-known footballer, although he's slightly better known because he came out many years ago and talked about suicidation, about how he felt about his own life and the struggles that he had in terms of mental illness. Football is an unforgiving sport at times. What it leads to is chants on the terraces by people who believe that as soon as they come through a turnstile, they have the ability to forget that they are human beings, that they have the right to say anything they wish. And it has been proven time and time again, racism and sectarianism is rife, as well as homophobia, across terraces across Scotland, where people believe they should be allowed to make monkey taunts and racist slurs and homophobic chanting. Not just that, the cruelty that comes from some of the chants. I remember a well-known Scottish footballer just after having lost his father, having to endure the chants from the terraces, which were, "Where's your daddy gone?" That is just disgusting, and it's disgraceful, and it's wrong. There is no defence for it. So for a person to have come forward and to talk of his mental health battles and to be in a beacon and attempted in his best manner to resolve and sort out, taking responsibility for his own recovery, to then find he is sitting on a substitute's bench and somebody he alleges has said that this person has said to him that he wished he had been successful in his attempt at suicide, is unacceptable if true. Now, it's an allegation, and there are people who are going to look into it, and what I've written this week is something I feel very, very strongly about. We are at the very beginning of understanding mental illness. We're at the very beginning of understanding gender identity. We're at the very beginning of understanding a whole host of things. And what we need is education, understanding and love. What we don't need is the bigots, misogynists and those who are attempting to turn the clock back. What we don't need is a macho culture which attempts to be big and hairy and gruff and punish weakness. What we need is understanding and love and responsibility, but that cuts two ways. What we need to have is not only the opportunity to condemn those who will continue to trawl and continue to say things, but also a way in which we try our best to bring them back into a fold to create a society of equality and diversity, and one that brings people of differing opinions together rather than polarising them to such an extent that resentment builds up and we end up not changing people's minds but hardening their attitudes. If, as is alleged, the person who said this to David Cox was the Stenhousemuir captain, Jonathan Tiffany, then Tiff should have the book thrown at him, whatever that is. But if he's abandoned and he's left flailing because of something he said or he did, then I think that causes us and causes me some concern, because he will get vilified on social media. Many people are, for reasons which are understandable on the one hand, but also we should be a society that attempts to build bridges, not knock people down. So, given that David Cox has really done an amazing amount of work in order to help others, I think he deserves every ounce of support. But if anybody has been so mistaken that they've done what they've done, I think we also need to find a way of working alongside them too. So, with that in mind, we go to the polls, once in a generation, and the Joe Biden package that I've talked so warmly about in my column this week for Ringside Report, hopefully will get through Congress, will become law, and what we will see is America having a new dawn. And what I'd love to happen is the hands across the ocean from Scotland as an independent country, holding their hands not just in the new dawn of a social care system that is 21st century in origin, but also the beginning of the real effects of climate change, the climate crisis, and the climate emergency being tackled by countries like us and like theirs, that's going to make a real difference to generations that are coming after us. So, from me this week, hopefully next week, what we'll be talking about is a massive majority of people who have voted for an independence referendum to see Scotland take the first steps for that responsibility to be ours and not anybody else's. Till then, bye for now.